Certainly water has been the theme today, and that's going to be the large continuation in the weather as we look ahead here. Starting with the last week in review here, it was a warmer than normal week. Probably no big surprises there. Mean average temperatures for the week averaged from 2 to as much as 4 degrees above normal. You can see on the left. The big news, though, on the right-hand side was our precipitation, and we had arguably the most widespread and more uniform rainfall across the state than we've seen, and we'll call it several weeks. We could probably call it a couple of months as well. The color graphics here, most areas had between a half and 1 inch were minimum, but there were some areas, western upper, west central lower, and portions of southeastern lower had over 2 inches, where the yellow and some of the reds even heavier than that. One noticeable area that was missed by the rainfall here, you can see in northwestern lower, where there was generally less than a quarter of an inch. But again, if we look at this very, very unusually dry growing season, this was the most uniform or best rain we've had in a long time. And so we're going to start there. We're looking at a forecast, and there's the prospects certainly suggest that we will see more frequent chances for rain here looking ahead than we have during much of the growing season thus far. And to follow up on some of what Young Suk has been talking about, and he mentioned the sphinx soil, which is what we have at our EnviroWeather site in Hazlitt. Obviously a very, very quartz textured, well-drained, and a very dry soil. But I just wanted to show this because at this particular site, during that wetter period here over the last week to 10 days, we had 1.6 inches of rain at that site, which again is the most we'd had since early April. And so what you're looking at is another form of the diagrams that Young Suk showed for different locations. Volumetric soil moisture here in the 3 series at 4 inches is in the red, 8 inches in the brown, and then down at 20 inches here in the purple. And this one goes back to the beginning of April. So you can see again the seasonal drawdown, which is in this year, 2023, because of the dryness, has been much more rapid than typically takes place in Michigan. The daily precipitation totals are given here in the blue bars. And again, I wanted to sort of bring your attention to this lower right part of the graphic here, which is where we've had the precip over the last couple of weeks. And what was really, well, noteworthy to me is that at this particular site, again, on a very dry soil, we were below wilting point for really, that started back in late May and continued into a good chunk of June. So very, very dry topsoils here. And then even with that addition of actually it was 1.64 inches of rain here over the past, you can see that it did moisten the top 2 levels here, again, 4 and 8 inches, but the 20 inches, the wetting front never made it that far down, which I was a little surprised. It also suggests here that that also includes, and we had evapotranspiration taking place during that time, but that water has been used up very, very rapidly. And so, again, it's a reminder of how long and how severe the dryness has been this year. Here's another graphic looking at this from a historical perspective. This is from Three Rivers down in St. Joe County, and you're looking at daily accumulated precipitation from the 5th of April through the 5th of July. Again, not to belabor the point, but it just the dryness and the magnitude of it are quite significant here this year. The green is the observed total, and you can see over this about 90-day period, 4.35 inches of rain fell at Three Rivers. And this, I'm choosing these sites. These are representative of those particular areas, I think, are fairly representative. They're single site locations, but they are representative. The normal, though, you can see during this period, almost 3 months, is almost 12 inches, 11.87, which leaves us with a deficit of about 7.5 inches for the 3-month period. And just as importantly, as Young Suk has pointed out here, the potential evaporative demand from the atmosphere during that time frame, almost 15 inches. So again, all these things collectively just point to just not enough water in the system, and you can see that continues up to the present. So even though, yes, we have had rainfall over the last couple of weeks, and it was really, really needed, we are going to need more. And one last one here, looking at this spatially across the state. These are 90 days, so looking at the same time frame here, back to early April, the last 3 months. The observed totals of precipitation down here on the bottom, you can see are quite variable. Some areas of the state, especially up in western upper Michigan, have done better. Parts of the northern lower, they picked up over 8 inches of rain during that time frame. Other areas, though, have been much less than that. Some cases less than 4 inches. In terms of a departure from normal, you can see that over much of lower Michigan, we still have long-term deficits here on the order of 4 to as much as 8 inches. That's a lot of water. That's more than 2 months full of growing season rainfall, or even more. Expressed in terms on the upper right-hand side here is a percentage of normal, generally less than half of normal. And you can see the dryness is really most acute, or this departure in really across western and southern lower Michigan. That's really where the worst conditions are, and notably other parts of the Corn Belt. Large sections of the Corn Belt have been impacted by the same feature. So finally here, the latest drought monitor, and this is actually dated. There's a new one coming out here a little bit later this morning, but 84% of Michigan now categorized as abnormally dry, including now 5% or 4% in the D2 or severe drought. And that is in that area we just looked at, portions of west central and then in south central, southwestern lower Michigan. That's where the departures or deficits are greatest. One last thing here too, we talked about this a little bit last week. During the last week, especially with the weather pattern change that we have seen, we have had, there have been much more significant rainfall in areas to our south and west. And down on the bottom here, you can see these are weekly totals looking at the Corn Belt. And so some parts of especially the southern and central Corn Belt, southern Iowa, over into western Illinois, those areas picked up in some cases as much as 4 inches of rainfall during that week, and they have huge deficits. But that's a lot of water. It's in a short time frame, but there are obviously some very, very dramatic impacts with that, and more rain is expected here as we look into the next couple weeks. So that's where I want to head. Where are we going here in terms of the forecast? This morning, we've got a cold front north to south across the state. You can see it's really over central portions up into northeastern lower, and it's slowly making its way to the east. It'll be out of the state by later this evening, but we have some showers and thunder showers here along that. Much of that is in the eastern half of lower Michigan. Most of that will continue over the next couple hours. There will also be some dissipation of this activity during the day, but look for some redevelopment because this front, again, is still going to be with us. So by afternoon, I would look for redevelopment of showers and thunder showers in the eastern part of east central and southeastern lower Michigan here, but it'll be back as far, I think, as central and south central lower Michigan. You still have a chance for rain redeveloping this afternoon. And that's the best chance that we will see here today. Probably 60-70% chance that we'll see precip. Most areas seeing about 1/4 of an inch, maybe some better than that. But again, we take everything we can get these days. But that's what we're looking at here over the next 12 hours. By tomorrow, high pressure moves in. It will be significantly cooler than it's been, especially after yesterday's heat and humidity. High temperatures today, and well, with clouds, mostly in the mid and upper 70s. Tomorrow, with some sun, we'll do a degree or so better than that, up around 80, upper 70s north to around 80 in the south. Beautiful conditions, though, tomorrow, much less humid. Our nighttime temperatures are going to fall back into the 50s as well. So a noticeable cool down here as we move into the weekend. And then looking at Saturday, we will be on the northern periphery of a weather system going across the Ohio Valley. Chance for showers, but right now it looks like that's going to be isolated or scattered at best, maybe a 30% chance or so, especially again in southern lower Michigan here during the day on Saturday. Little to speak of really in terms of totals, less than 1/4 of an inch where it falls. Most areas will remain dry. At this point, Sunday looks dry, and then the next chance for precipitation after that probably coming on Monday in the far northern and northwestern part of the state, and then overspreading the state really on almost a daily basis into the middle of next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday timeframe, with a daily chance for showers and thunder showers. So again, more chances for precipitation, more opportunities than we've had in a long time. What does it all add up to in the rain gauge, at least in terms of our potential? Most areas looking at a half, maybe 3/4. That may be a little bit of aggressive, especially but the best totals I think with the next week are looking like they will be in the eastern portions of lower Michigan. So again, more chances, and actually, if we look at PET again, back to Young Sook's presentation here, what are we looking at for the next week? With an unsettled type of weather pattern, probably about 0.2 of an inch of reference potential evapotranspiration per day on average over the next week, which is a little bit higher than normal for this time of the year, but not excessively so. But 0.2 or so is a general rule of thumb you could think of for the next several days. Well, moving finally out into the medium range, where are we headed? The lower left, I think this is an important one. It suggests once again that we will see very high amplitude or blocky jet stream flow here across North America. Notice this big troughing feature, Hudson Bay. And if you didn't know, you looked at this weather map, you'd say, well, there's no way that this can be in summer. This looks like almost like the cold season when we're more typical to see this kind of a pattern. But the bottom line is that it is very amplified once again, and that trough is really over us in the Great Lakes region. As a result, mean temperatures forecast-wise here for the next at least 1 to 2 weeks are looking at tops at normal, but probably cooler than that, a little bit below normal. And you can see that upper right with our mean temperature forecast. Just as, or even more importantly, it also suggests an unsettled weather pattern with frequent chances for rain. It doesn't say that we'll be getting a big, huge rainmaker coming up here with Gulf of Mexico moisture, but a lot of opportunities, again, in terms of the frequency of rain and normal to above normal precip totals. And that's true for both the 6 to 10 day and the 8 to 14 day timeframes, which take us into the beginning of that third week of the month. The big question, I think, is what happens after this. And again, the guidance is saying, well, there may be a little bit of a de-amplification or lessening of these features. But when this year, one of the key issues with our jet stream has just been how large the amplified blocky flow pattern has just been remarkable. And we could just as easy end up underneath one of the ridges here, and that would bring us back into heat and dryness once again. So that's again why we're so concerned, or we're so need to know what happens what's the next piece of the flow pattern here, what's the progression after this, and we'll be watching that here certainly in the upcoming week. So wrapping up here again with the frontal passage today. Lingering chances for rain. It'll be clearing in the western part of the state during the day. Tomorrow, gorgeous day to be outside and hopefully can get things done. But then moving in by the weekend or early next week into an unsettled weather pattern with frequent chances for rainfall. Temperatures cooling back down to near or even a little bit below normal in the near term, but then warming up back up to summer-like levels here by late in the week and early next week. And as you just saw, the medium range suggests back to cooler, maybe a little bit wetter than normal conditions for the following week and maybe a little bit beyond that. And with that, I'll wrap up and introduce next week's speaker. Our virtual breakfast next week on the 13th of July is Dr. Brooke Wilkie, who's going to be with us to talk about cover crops after wheat. And of course, some of that wheat probably beginning to come off in some parts of the state, weather permitting, but Brooke will be with us here next Thursday, so don't miss that.